This is my ranking of all 4 Kung Fu Panda movies. Let me know yours down in the comments. Skadoosh! And in last place, we have Kung Fu Panda 3. Now, just because this is in last place does not mean this movie is bad. It just never lived up to the potential that this franchise has. We get some great fight choreography. We even get Po and the Furious 5 put against each other in a memorable way, not just in sparring sessions, but still none of it as iconic or as memorable as we see the fight sequences in the first 2 movies. And then with the Furious 5, they are great characters, but they're resorted to supporting characters in this film, and they're never replaced with anyone nearly as compelling or as interesting. Instead, they're replaced with Po's 2 dads. While this does create some interesting character dynamics between the 2 of them as they try to compete for Po's affection, we spend the majority of the time in this panda village learning chi in order to defeat Kai. But with that, we get these training montages of Po learning to be a panda, and with that comes stuffing your face, sleeping in, and rolling around. And these training montages, that's not what we want to see in Kung Fu Panda movies. We want to see Kung Fu. And these training montages just never give us as much of a character arc for Po as we see in the first 2 movies. Instead, it's just a rehash of the lessons Shifu learned in the first film, that I can't train you to be me, I have to train you to be the best version of yourself. And then as we get into the villain, Kai, a very weak villain, not given any tragic backstory. He's given a backstory that ties to Oogway to allow it to have some greater connection to the saga, but it's not an interesting backstory. It's very forced, and it just makes for a very generic villain of, I want power, so give me more power. Now, the one thing this film does very good is letting us experience the spirit realm, and does create some very stylistic, creative animation and fight choreography that we haven't seen in the other films. But like I said, this film is not bad. It has all the right ingredients to be a great Kung Fu Panda movie, but none of these ingredients are cooked properly. But that'll take us into our next film, Kung Fu Panda 4. Now, I think 4 is only marginally better than 3. In some ways, it's actually worse. The comedy's very hit or miss, and a lot of that's due to Awkwafina's character, and there's not nearly as much of an emotional arc for Po to go through. But what elevates this film for me over Kung Fu Panda 3 is the natural progression that Po goes through as a character. At the end of Kung Fu Panda 3, we get to see Po take Master Oogway's staff when they meet in the spirit realm. And so now in this film, Po is thrust into the Master Oogway role as the spiritual leader, where he has to select the next Dragon Warrior. And of course, Po's a little bit hesitant to do so, as he just learned what it means to be the Dragon Warrior, and he's not ready to let go of that just yet. So going from worthless hero in Kung Fu Panda to spiritual leader in Kung Fu Panda 4 was just a great full circle arc for Po that made for a very emotionally satisfying conclusion to his story. Now, the individual that he selects to be the next Dragon Warrior can be very predictable, as we spend so much time with this character. It was only inevitable that they are chosen. And then this individual, Awkwafina's character Zen, kind of takes the place of the Furious 5, as the Furious 5's all but eliminated from this film entirely. But unlike in Kung Fu Panda 3, the focus is back on the Kung Fu, back on the action, and it just made for a lot more of an enjoyable film to watch. And then as we get into the villain, the Chameleon, while the backstory's even weaker than Kai's, and they have the same goal of Kai of collecting power, this film was able to do it more convincingly and more menacingly. While Kai had these jade zombies mostly do the bidding for him, the Chameleon is willing and able to do the work herself. And as she's collecting the Kung Fu powers of those in the spirit realm, we get to see Po's former villains, and we get to see Tai Lung back in action, which is always amazing. And when she's finally defeated, Po actually earns the respect of those that once stood against him. And it just made for a very satisfying arc, as we talked about before, as nobody saw potential in him, including himself, and he's finally earned the respect of those that opposed him and could never in a million years respect him. But before we get into the top 2 films, let me know your ranking down in the comments. And if you like this type of content, consider liking and subscribing so you can see more content from me. I plan to do many rankings of various animated franchise, DreamWorks, Pixar, Disney. So consider subscribing if that interests you. But with that, let's get into our runner-up, Kung Fu Panda. And we have a massive jump in quality here, because this film is fantastic and it was such a pivotal part of my childhood. One of the first films films I remember seeing in theaters, and I remember after this film came out, all of my friends tried to do the whooshy finger hold on each other. But what makes this film so fantastic is the voice casting is excellent. You can say that about all the films in this franchise. I didn't mention it in the previous two. And the animation is astounding, and the fight choreography is so unique. With these films being about anthropomorphic animals, everybody's got their own unique fighting style to match their animal, to match their size. So all of these fight sequences have their own distinct flavor to them. And of course, the main thing about this film that makes it just truly a great film is the messaging behind it. Even though this is a very comedic franchise with lots of jokes, it's got a lot of heart and humanity to it. Po is the ultimate underdog. Nobody believes in him. He doesn't even believe in himself. But over the course of the film, he has to learn that in order to be a great kung fu master, that there is no secret ingredient. The secret ingredient is just belief in yourself. Just a great message that once you put your mind to something, you can absolutely do it. Fantastic message. And then, of course, you can't talk about this film without talking about the villain, Tai Lung. Very tragic backstory about parental expectations. And then, of course, every scene he's in is a great action sequence. He steals every scene that he's in. And the prison escape, the best scene in the entire franchise and maybe in all of Dreamworks. I really don't have anything negative to say about this film. I just think that this next film did everything better. So the best Kung Fu Panda film is undoubtedly Kung Fu Panda 2. This film takes everything that's great about Kung Fu Panda and just elevates it. The humor is excellent. The voice acting is astounding. And the action is a lot more interesting here because now that Po is its own Kung Fu warrior, he gets to get in on the action with the Furious Five, which creates for some very unique and interesting fight combinations that we hadn't seen in the first film. As in the first film, he's fighting separately from the Furious Five. And then while the villain I don't think is as great or as iconic as Tai Lung, it's still very good, and this is the first and only villain that has a personal connection to Po. But the biggest strength that this film has, it's how emotional it is. They took such a comedic character and gave him such a tragic backstory that goes back to the villain. And then as Po's learning inner peace, he has to learn that he can't change the past. He can't change what happened to him. He can only choose how he lets it affect him. And this is very the opposite of the villain who can't let go of the past and is so scared, ultimately leads to his downfall. So just for many reasons, Kung Fu Panda 2 was a great film to rewatch and just a phenomenal movie. The best in the franchise and one of the best films that DreamWorks has ever put out. Can you let me know down in the comments what your ranking of these films are? Which ones am I completely off about? Which ones am I spot on? But that'll do it for this video. If you like this type of content, again, subscribe so you can see more videos from me in the future. DreamWorks, Disney, Pixar, other franchises, Jason Bourne, Pirates of the Caribbean, all in the works. But that'll do it for this video, and I will see you in the next one.